word or it's mine. And his words live forever. That's Luke chapter 2. To look at some things, we're going to read through verses 1 through 20. 1 through 20 this morning. And we want to talk about, or not talk about it, we want to notice things that are there. God, just let us see, what have you told us there? Okay? So, at a sovereign God at work. We've been talking about topic a lot lately, the sovereignty of God, that he's in charge. And we can say that in church. Oh, God is sovereign. You know, and half the time, we're not even sure what that word means. It means he's all-powerful. Okay? He's in charge. But we don't really walk out our faith like we believe that. So much of our life, we're walking around with our head down and our shoulders slouched over and feeling defeated and beat down, and we look at the world and it seems like a mess, and it is. But it's not because of him, and it's not because he's messed up his plan. It's us run amok. But the great thing that we have to hold on to is he's still in charge. He's still in charge. As bad as it looks at times, as superficial as we can make things at times, as things get at times, he's still God. And he's still in charge. And no matter how bad we make it, he's going to be glorified. It's going to happen. And no matter how hard people try to disobey or defy or stop what he is doing, what he's doing will be done. So we're going to take a look at a sovereign God at work. We're going to take a look at how God made himself vulnerable. That just blows me away. An omnipotent God who spoke the world into being, how he made himself vulnerable. We're going to take a look and see how he makes himself known to the humble, to the lowly. And that doesn't necessarily mean stature of where you are in society. Many times it can be. But to those whose hearts are humble, he'll make himself known. And as he makes himself known, it can't help but prompt us to obedience. We're given an opportunity to obey and to move out in power. Doesn't mean we will, but it prompts us to obey. So that's what we want to look at as we take a look at our 1 through 20 verses. So let's start with our next slide, and it's verses 1 through 3. Okay, it's almost like a history thing. You know, it's slotting it in a place and a time frame of when it took place. It says, in those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to their own town to register. Now, Augustus Caesar, he's a historical figure, okay? He was the first emperor, okay, basically declared himself, you know, I'm emperor. And he considered himself a god. He considered himself literally a god. Of course, that's kind of was a common theme with the emperors, the Caesars. And this guy, he's issuing this decree, we're going to take a census. But what's so awesome to me is he's doing God's work. He doesn't know it. He's just, you know, doing it for his own reasons and why. You know, he wants to know how many are in his, out there in his provinces, but probably so he can tax them. You know, I'm sure that probably was his motivation, to make sure we get every last person so we can get money from them. And yet, he's doing God's work. Has no idea. Lost as can be, thinks he's divine, misuses God's people, the Jewish people. But he's getting Mary and Joseph to Bethlehem. Because, you see, God said that's where the Savior was going to come to. So we see over in verse 4, it says, so Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea. You see, he had to obey the law. And his family was from Bethlehem because he was in the line of David, just like all the prophecies had said. And so it says, he went to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. So you see the map and where they were in Nazareth and how they traveled down. Now, I'd hate to do that one in a car, much less walking, much less with my expecting wife on the back of a donkey. We take all that for granted. Don't you know on the journey, we know from other passages that God has spoken to Joseph, and he said, don't fear, this is of me. Take her as your wife. He's spoken to Mary with the angel Gabriel and told her that she was to be with child, and she didn't know how, and he explained that it would be the Holy Spirit. Okay, so they've been given a little bit of knowledge, but now they got to be going, why do we have to go to Bethlehem? God, this is terrible timing. This is terrible timing. She's pregnant, God. I mean, she could conceive it. I mean, she could go into labor at any moment now. And we could be out here stranded. I'm sure all these thoughts are going through his head. I don't know what we're going to do when we get there. How are we going to, who's going to take care of her? How are we going to go through this? All these questions, and yet God is working all this out to his end to fulfill prophecies that have been shared hundreds and hundreds of years earlier. He had it all set up. We take a look in Micah chapter 5, verse 2, and it says, but you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. You see, he said this a long time before this event is happening. They have no idea how all this is, how they're playing into this. It helps us as we look at this to understand God is sovereign. And the things that go on in our life, the inconveniences, the frustrations, I'm sure you've had a few in the last few days. As we build to family get-togethers and going from this house to that house and kids running around and it's loud and all the, got to get so-and-so a present, all those things. And, things get inconvenient. And they can get frustrating. And life happens. Life happens. And we go, God, how in the world can this be part of your plan? And yet it is. It wouldn't be happening this way. Do we really believe he's sovereign? Do I really trust him? Even when it's not working out, I think it's supposed to work out. Do I really trust him when I don't see his fingerprints? And I just have to trust that he is who he says he is. We go back to verse 6, and we see how in the midst of all this, how God comes in such a vulnerable way. The King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, doesn't show up in a divan chair being carried around on someone's shoulders. He comes as the most vulnerable place and way that he could have come, and that of an infant. He's trusting himself to these people to care for Jesus, to watch over him, to minister to him, to raise him. It says in verse 6, while they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn. And she wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for him. Now, there's been a zillion sermons written about that. Nobody had room. Obviously, the connection is easily made. Do we have room? Do we have room in our heart for him? Do we have room in our heart for what he is asking of us today? Do we have room in our heart for the people that he's putting around us? You know, it's easy for us to tell him all the things that the other person is doing that's wearing you out, that's bugging you, that's ticking you off, that's pushing them away from you. And then he asks us, do you have room? He had it for us. And he came for us and loved us when we didn't deserve it. And now we get that opportunity to do that for others. But he came in this vulnerable, small, delicate way. You know, I saw this if you're on social media, you probably saw it. I had about 5 people send it to me. They all know I love C.S. Lewis. So, and they sent, once in our world, a stable had something in it that was bigger than the whole world. That's pretty cool. There was something in a little manger that was bigger than the whole world. And that was Jesus. He's the one that was there when it all started. When all of creation was made, he was there. And yet he came in a very humble stable for you and for me. You know, I look at Hebrews 4:15. It says, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who in every respect has been tested as we are, yet was without sin." Man, we got no excuse. We have no excuse. He came. All the things that we would have said to God, well, you just don't, you're God. You don't understand. You haven't been through it. You haven't been tempted like us. You haven't gone through hardship like us. You haven't lost a loved one like us. All those things, he's seen them all. Experienced them all. Walked through them blameless. And he did it for us. For us. So that he could love us in a very unique way. So that whenever we do lose a loved one, he knows. He knows what it feels like. So that when we feel lowly and betrayed, he knows what it feels like. He came and did this life that we do for us. Pretty amazing. So we go to our next slide. And we take a look at verses 8 through 12. And we see how God shows up to those who are humbled. These shepherds that he's going to reveal himself to, they would have been unclean, okay, and unable to come into the temple because of their livelihood. There were certain rituals that you had to go through to come into the temple and so forth. And because of their livelihood, they were out there. They had to stay out there. And you look at who God shows up.